Mark. My name is Katrina Mitchell, and I'm the founder of Franchise Speakers. We specialize in helping franchisors find the perfect presenters, educators, and speakers for their events. And it's my pleasure to facilitate today's session with Greg Nathan. Greg is a business psychologist and the founder of the Franchise Relationships Institute. And he's highly regarded around the world for his insights his insights into how to help franchisors and franchisees improve the quality of their franchise relationships. So our topic for the next 45 minutes is how to navigate the paradoxes in franchising. And we all know that there are a lot of them. Welcome, Greg. Thanks for being with us. I know it's really early for you. And once again, you are such a great sport for getting on this call so early in the morning. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. It is 6 a.m. here, but I'm feeling great. I love these sessions. We can explore important topics, and I'm really looking forward to hearing comments and questions from the group.
Great. So for those of you who just came on, Greg loves to see everyone on video. He says he doesn't talk to computers, he talks to people. So if you are open to turning your video on, that would be great. I'm also going to encourage everyone to put all of your burning questions in the chat. We have this time with Greg, and I know that he's got so much information to share. So please don't hesitate to ask specific questions as we go along. So my first question, Greg, is I know you like to often start these sessions with a question to the group. So what would you like to pose?
Yeah, I've just got one slide that I wanted to share with the group today, and the rest of it I'll just be chatting. My question for the group is franchisee or franchisor? What do you think? Now, this is an example of a paradox in franchising because franchisors often assume they're calling the shots, while the franchisees can simultaneously think that they should be calling the shots. And of course, this makes for some interesting organizational dynamics. So Charlene's jumped in and said, definitely franchisee. Of course, the truth is the person that's ultimately should be calling the shots is the customer, the end customer. And it's when we lose sight of this that we do get distracted from the main game. So I'll stop sharing that slide. But I do have a question for everyone. And I'd like you to think of something that's been on your mind. All right? It could be something that's distracting you at the moment. And you might even like to take a pen and paper and jot this down. Or if you're feeling in a bit of a sharing mood, you're welcome to pop it into the feed as well. But the important thing is I want you to acknowledge and to accept it. Something that's on your mind distracting you at the moment. So what might that be? Okay. Now, the reason why I've asked you to think of something that has been distracting you is I want you to be as focused as possible in the session. And this is a psychological technique. I call it name it to tame it. And paradoxically, acknowledging or naming something that's bothering or distracting us tends to focus our mind more in the present. Now, the reason why we don't like to acknowledge stuff often is we've got this fear that, it might make it worse. But in my experience, when we face into a concern and we accept it, it actually helps to settle things down and focus the mind so we can think more clearly. And this is an example of a paradox. A paradox is something that seems to have contradictory qualities or to be contrary to common sense. And I have to say that franchising, as Katrina mentioned earlier, it's full of paradoxes. And I'll give you an example of something that we deal with all the time at the Franchise Relationships Institute. We run a lot of franchisee satisfaction surveys for our franchisor and franchisee clients. And often the results are pretty good. However, franchisees do tend to be very honest. They can be brutally honest, and they will point out stuff that they're not happy with. And when we show the findings of the surveys to our franchisor clients, there can be a tendency to look for ways to hide or disguise the bad stuff and only present the findings back to the franchisees that make the franchisor look artificially better than perhaps it is, or make things look better than perhaps they are. And now I understand the intention is that the franchisor team don't want to damage their credibility, but my experience is, and this is from hundreds and hundreds of surveys, is that when we present the results of the surveys back to the franchisees in a factual way, with a fair amount of detail, no matter how bad they are, it actually enhances the credibility of the franchisor. So the paradox here is, by acknowledging the facts of how things really are, franchisees feel relieved, they feel validated, and they become more confident in engaging with the franchisor to help improve things. Now, many of you would have read Jim Collins's work. Jim wrote Good to Great and many other fantastic books, and he refers to this as facing the brutal facts. So that's the first paradox that I just wanted to raise there, Katrina, about facing into things actually settles them down.
Thank you, Greg. So you're saying that paradoxes are things that seem to be self-contradictory or seem like they can't exist together when in fact they can?
Yeah, exactly. I've got a good friend, Glenn Barnes. She's a facilitator and a coach. She's outstanding. And Glenn has this little bird. It's got a little magnet on it, and she calls it the bird of paradox. The bird of paradox. And she balances this little bird on her finger. And when she tilts her finger one way, the bird adjusts and it stays balancing on her finger. It doesn't fall off. And her point is that when we're faced with a challenge, we'll often think in a black and white solution mode. We think that we have to do one thing or we have to do the other thing. And in doing so, we can throw things off balance. We think that we've got to do, it's got to be A or B. And Glenn's point is that often we need to do A and B, that options that seem contradictory can coexist. There's a famous quote by F. Scott Fitzgerald, the novelist, and I love this quote. And he says, "The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function." So an example of this would be tough love. So that rather than thinking that we have to either be pleasant and accommodating or we've got to be tough and uncompromising, you can actually be uncompromising on an important issue, and you can also be pleasant and reasonable in explaining the reason why for this.
Great, thank you. I love that quote. And I really struggle thinking about how to get my head around that. So you've definitely given me something to think about, Greg. So can you give us some examples of other paradoxes in relation to franchising?
Yeah, and there's probably around 15 paradoxes that I've identified, and they're embedded within the franchising model. But today, I'm just going to touch on a few of these, and we'll explore together some ideas on how to manage these with the group. Now, the first one, I'd call it the paradox of compliance. So on the one hand, franchisors expect franchisees to comply with policies and procedures, don't mess with the model. And in the same breath, we expect the franchisees to be entrepreneurial. We want them to take initiative and address challenges and opportunities in their local markets. And I'm sure everyone on the call has faced this practice of how compliance needs to coexist with freedom and initiative. And so I have a question for the group, and I'd like to invite people to pop their thoughts into the feed. How do you manage this paradox of compliance along with initiative and entrepreneurship? Now, while people are gathering their thoughts, I'll just put a suggestion that I think we need to define the non-negotiables, things that are fundamental to your brand and that can't be changed. And this might be certain core products that must be provided. It might be certain systems that must be used. However, you can also provide a kind of a sandpit for people to play within with boundaries where we can encourage people to take initiative encourage them to innovate. It could be around how they manage their teams. It could be how they deliver certain promotions or local marketing. Are there any comments coming in there, Katrina?
We've got a few. So from Rob, focus on our mission and core values. From Prit, the way I did it was to enforce the compliance, making the business case of doing so, and not just to do it because you have to.
Yes, yes. So giving the why. Thanks, Prit. Thanks, Rob. Stacey said, yeah, let's throw in a pandemic as well. I'm going to come back to that, Stacey. Very good. All right, well, look, I'm going to talk about another paradox. We'll cover around about 5 or 6 today, and that's the paradox of change, which Stacey has set us up nicely for. So we have a basic instinct, all of us as humans, and the instincts are the way that the brain is almost programmed to behave. And one of these is we all share a need for certainty, all right? So certainty means safety in many cases. Franchisees want to know what's going on. They want to have some certainty around what's going on in the network. What are our plans? What are our strategies? They bought into a model and they expect that what I bought into is going to continue. But bring on a pandemic, bring on changes in customer buying habits, bring on new generations. So we know that we live in what's called a VUCA world, a world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and we need to accept this. And so we need to be constantly adapting our networks and our businesses. Otherwise, we're going to become irrelevant. So again, a question for everyone. How do you manage this paradox of creating a sense of stability and certainty while also adapting our models and embracing change? And I think a couple of people mentioned, Rob Ellis mentioned about, I'm just looking at the feed up on my screen here, focus on our mission and core values. So I like that. And there's some other comments coming in from Richard and Charmaine. Yeah. Now I'll throw, while these comments are coming in, I'll throw a suggestion in here. In our franchisor training programs, we run a franchisor excellence masterclass. We talk a lot about change and how to get franchisees to engage with change. And one tool that we share, I call it the organizational iceberg. So at the tip of the iceberg, which is the piece that everybody, the customers see, you've got our products and our services. But as we go deeper into the iceberg, which is where the substantive part of the iceberg is, we've got right down in the bottom, our culture and our identity. And this is like, who are we? What do we stand for? Why do we exist? What are our core values? This gives us our sense of identity. And one thing that we can do to create a sense of stability during change is to remind franchisees that our core values around fundamentally who we are staying the same. So this may be your commitment to customer satisfaction, for instance. It might be your commitment to franchisee profitability. It might be that we are committed to consulting with everybody before we make major decisions. This is the way we do things. So during change, focus back on your core values, remind people what you stand for, and this can help to strengthen their sense of identity, as well as saying, and we're also adapting in these other areas to stay relevant. What else is coming through there, Katrina?
That's great. Charmaine contributed, make use of your franchise advisory council. Saul said, communicate with integrity, and you might have the answer in the moment. You tell them you might not have the answer in the moment, but you're working on it, and get back to them with a quick turnaround. I think that's what you meant.
Saul, if I can just comment on Saul's comment there, that's coming back to what I was referring to earlier. That honesty, that brutal honesty, and being very specific builds credibility, because people know where they stand, and it builds trust. So I really encourage that.
Yeah. And Charmaine suggested ask for recommendations from the network so that they're involved in the solutions process.
Yeah. And that's that by involving people, you build engagement. The most powerful tool I know to build this sense of ownership, engagement, and buy-in is to involve people. But I'll come back to this in a moment. You need to be very clear on the boundaries. Like, involving people doesn't mean that you give away all your power. That's creating chaos. Now, I want to talk a little bit about another paradox, and this may be relevant to many people on the call today. It's the paradox of franchise sales. So the fact is that most franchisors want to quickly expand. They want to grow. They want to sell as many franchises as possible so they can build market share. But they also, good franchisors also recognize that they have to have quality franchisees. Otherwise, you're going to end up with this large network of underperforming people, underperforming units, and that's a recipe for disaster. It's unsustainable. So how do we grow quickly but not recklessly? So that's a question, again, I'd like you to consider. And again, if anyone has a thought on this in the feed, really great to hear this. But our recommendation on this is to approach the franchise recruitment process. I call it a recruitment process rather than a sales process, as a coaching process. So we want to get to know our candidates as well as possible, and to help them to get to know us and our business as well as possible, and to ensure that expectations are aligned. Now, the research that we've done shows that franchise relationships break down often. It's not a problem with the person, the franchisee, it's a problem with their expectations. And that can produce anger when people's expectations are not met. And there's many systems and processes that we can use to help franchisees to understand us, like discovery days and so on, and to help us understand them. So there's no surprises later on. So what I'd propose is there's no such thing as the ideal franchisee. People evolve and change over time, but we should be aiming at attracting candidates that have a lot of brand passion, candidates with good business acumen, and with a positive attitude, people that we can work well with. And so what we need to avoid is finding out unpleasant surprises about somebody later on. So any other thoughts about how we balance this need to grow quickly but with quality?
So Evan, thank you for chiming in. Evan contributed systems training, high touch support.
Good. Anything else?
New from Richard, new franchisees need alignment with your values, which is essentially what you were just emphasizing.
Yes, and I think we need to have those conversations up front. Good franchisees will ask good questions, in my experience, but they may even challenge you a little bit about, well, what's your plans over the next 3 years? Tell me about franchisees that haven't succeeded. Why do you think they didn't succeed? And having those conversations about what's important. I think Sol's got something there, Katrina.
Yeah, let's see. Sorry, I was. So develop a roadmap for employees to be franchisees of the future. Nurture and support the employees of the franchisees that want to grow with the company.
Thank you, Sol. This is a real passion of mine, and I think it's an area that we're going to see flourish more and more in the future, that we have development paths within our networks where we identify high potential, passionate people who love what we do, love making a difference, and encouraging those people to grow and become our future franchisees, and also encouraging our high performance existing smaller franchisees to grow into multi-unit operators.
Great. Michelle, set up a buddy initiation training session. You'll soon find out the duds before you sell them the franchise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Franchisees have a sense, don't they, about another franchisee and whether they're going to work out or not. It's great. Thanks, Michelle. So I'll touch on a fourth paradox, and that's I call it the paradox of the family culture. So, we hear franchise or CEOs stand up and say, we're all a big family and so on. And often our franchise networks have been started by an entrepreneur, and he or she, often a charismatic person, and they do build a family culture where people get to know each other personally in the early days. People go on holidays together. But the unpleasant truth is that most families are dysfunctional, or they have a dysfunctional side to it, if we're honest. And having a family culture in a business can have a dark side where people can become petty. People can become over tolerant of inappropriate behavior. Oh, that's just Bob, he'll settle down. Well, that's not right. But for your brand, Bob might be behaving in a way that's undermining your culture, for instance. And sometimes we get this over dependency on a charismatic, a benevolent dictator figure. Now, in the early days, that's probably okay as you're building the network. But as networks evolve and grow, they need to develop a certain independence and be able to operate without the charismatic figure. And this is the challenge for most founders about how to build a succession plan. So we might want to have a family feeling in our culture of care and common goals, but we need to be professional and we need to be able to make tough decisions. And sometimes the founder needs to go as well because the business has outgrown that person. So my question to the group is, how do we maintain a family feeling while also having a professional corporate culture? So start to think about that, and some of you may have experienced this. But my recommendation is that we talk about being a community rather than a family. Community. So communities can have a strong sense of identity. They can have shared values. They have shared goals. They have shared processes of the way we do things. But they also have regular changes to leadership, and they can be tough on non-compliance when they need to be. So I'm just wondering if people have got any thoughts on how to balance this family feel with professionalism.
We don't have any comments yet, but I'm hoping some will come in. That's a tough question.
And we all have to face into this. So my simple recommendation just on this one is to talk about community. Some businesses use the analogy of a sports team as not a bad analogy as well. Sports team have people and come and go, coaches change, captains change, but the team retains its culture and its identity.
I like that analogy. Evan chipped in that coaching is very important through the process. Start small as a family, but as the system grows, focus on the power of the network.
Prit, could I just ask you to come off mute for a minute if you're comfortable? And I'm just interested in your thoughts on the power, what you were thinking there.
Yeah, sure. I think that you mentioned it about the community is if you can not enforce, but kind of foster a system and community of sharing each other, where the franchisor does everything possible to enable sharing within the network. Because one of the things I always used to say is that the best experiences do not come from the franchisor, but it comes from the field. And so as a franchisor, whether you talk about a family or a system or a network, as to how do you foster that environment and culture of sharing and growing together.
Thanks, Prit. And again, this is a paradox, isn't it? That the franchisor often wants to be the source of truth and centralized systems and knowledge, and yet the real experience and knowledge often lies in the network, and it's how we balance and draw that out without losing control. I'm also interested, thanks, Prit, in Evan, you mentioned coaching. I'm just interested in what you had in mind there, Evan. You're welcome to come on.
I think a lot of times it's important for people that you want to evolve and grow to have coaching, to have an outside coach, a person they can talk to who has experience that can help them develop those skills.
Thank you. Good. And I just want to check, how's the connection? Can everybody hear okay? You're good? Great, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Stephen has just jumped in there. Family is family, but every family still only has one set of parents. The franchise always has the last say. Yeah, I like that idea, Stephen, about someone has to have the last say. Yes. But sometimes in a family, the parents don't change. Like you don't sack your parents. Like my mother-in-law is 105 and she's still there. My mother's 90, she's still there. They have the last say. But in franchising and in companies, sometimes we need to sack the founder. And Michael O'Driscoll, who's just commented. Katrina, do you want to just tease what Michael's saying there?
So trying to instill a community of caring inside a franchise is important. Sorry, Michael, I'm not really understanding this. Trying to instill a community of caring inside a franchise is important. It does work, but in reality, everyone needs to know that someone is responsible, managing integrity of the system and deal decisively with poor performance and behavior. No one likes weakness, and that undermines the community.
Yeah. So what Michael's saying is you need leadership. It's like what Stephen's saying as well. Ultimately, you've got to have leadership. You can't have an anarchy.
Yes.
However, what I'm suggesting is the leadership will change over time in a family. The leadership doesn't change, and we see trauma in franchise networks when the group is too dependent on the founder and the leader, and suddenly the founder announces they've sold the company, and then we've got panic.
So,
Greg,
sorry, Greg, I have a question. So if you're an emerging brand and you want to mindfully establish a culture that can evolve and grow, what are some of the key things that you might do in those very, very early days?
Yeah, well, I think focus on building a strong culture around certain solid ways of doing things. And as the company grows, the founder's job is to keep that culture strong while allowing the systems and the processes and new people to come in. So the founder should be constantly reinforcing, this is what we stand for, this is our customer promise, although, the depth of the iceberg I talked about. It's when people get insecure and things start changing deep down in the organization that you create this sense of doubt and fear in an organization about what's going on here. So, and I think when companies change hands, the best handovers happen when the culture is somehow maintained. That'd be my thought.
Thank you.
I'm going to move on for time and talk about another paradox, and that is the paradox of friendship. It's related a little bit to what we've been talking about. So sometimes franchisor executives feel like it's good to become friends with franchisees. Now, I've found that this always ends up in tears. The paradox here is that how do we have friendly relationships with our franchisees without becoming friends? Now, I've had debates with franchisor executives about this, and I am interested in hearing from the group on this. But my definition of a friend, it's somebody who you like to hang out with because you just enjoy their company. Now, the problem with this is that franchisees want fairness. They want consistency in the franchise relationship. And if a franchisor executive is becoming friends with some franchisees, this can generate jealousy, resentment, accusations of bias, of favoritism. And when tough decisions need to be made, friendships will often turn very sour and ugly. People can feel that they were betrayed. I thought you were my friend. So my advice is, remember, you have a duty, a responsibility to your franchisees to help them to be successful. That's your job, not to be liked by them, not to hang out with them and enjoy yourself. So you can be friendly, and you can even engage socially with franchisees. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as that opportunity is available to all franchisees and that it has a business purpose behind it. we're going to play golf, but the purpose of the golf game is I want to get to know you and get to know your business goals a little more. That's okay, but not I want to play golf with you because I just want to play golf with you. Any thoughts on this one, Katrina?
Well, Charmaine put in mutual respect. And what else do we have? You want to build strong relationships with franchisees, but the coach should be aware of the boundaries, from Saul. Thank you, Saul.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And Aletha, thank you, Aletha, has jumped in there. If you want to hear more about this stuff, contact Katrina, because we do have some programs, professional development programs, where we go into a lot of these concepts at a very practical level. We've got programs for senior executives, the Franchisor Excellence Masterclass. We've got a culture of franchising where we talk about this stuff more generally for support office teams. And we've also got programs for field consultants as well.
Yeah.
What's Prit saying there, Katrina?
No harm in building relationships. Friendships develop over time. He says he's still friends with some.
Yeah, and look, we can have this debate. I just say, Prit, be careful, because if that friendship gets too close and you need to make a decision, let's say, for instance, a territory comes up adjacent to an existing franchisee's business, and you decide that you're going to run that as a corporate-owned territory, and the franchisee is saying, I want that, or you offer that territory to another franchisee, that can cause a divide in the friendship. And what will happen is then that franchisee will make it their mission in life to destroy you. So it's almost like this is another paradox, that the wonderful friendship and your friends turn into your worst enemies, your worst nightmare. We don't want that. So just be very careful.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just aware of time, and we're going to finish on time. I'm going to talk about one final paradox, and then we'll open it up for a bit of a discussion, and we'll wrap it up. So this is the paradox of franchisee profitability and happiness. So there's a myth in franchising, and I often hear franchisors say, if they're making money, they're happy. Now, I can tell you empirically, I've researched this, it is not true. The logical conclusion to this myth is that the more money that franchisees make, the happier that they're going to be. But what is true is that a franchisee that is losing money will not be happy. Yes, I agree with that. No one wants to go broke and lose money. But once the business breaks even, and the franchisee, there's always that anxiety when you own your own business about, paying staff, paying the rent and paying those fixed expenses. But once we reach break even, there's this load that gets lifted. It's like we can breathe easily. We're now able to cover our basic costs, and now we're into profitability. And that's a beautiful moment. But what happens at that point is other needs start to kick in. Now, I mentioned earlier, we have an instinct in our brain that we need certainty in life. There are other instincts that drive humans. The need for recognition, the need for autonomy, for freedom, for control, for instance, the need for fairness, which I've touched on earlier. And I've frequently observed that the most angry and outspoken franchisees in a network can often be the most profitable franchisees. So this paradox is driven also by the fact that as franchisees gain more experience and as they get more confidence in running their businesses, the franchisor mysteriously becomes more ignorant and incompetent. Have you noticed that? That as a franchisee starts to learn how to run the business, suddenly you don't know anything anymore. And an analogy might be a little bit like teenagers and parents. Parents become more stupid in the eyes of their kids as the kids start to grow and turn into teenagers. And then later on, when the kids move into their 20s, it's like suddenly you become intelligent again. So I have developed a model around this called the franchisee factor, and it scientifically plots how satisfaction does drop over time as experience grows. And this is another paradox in franchising, that franchisors need to manage. And it's something that we do talk a lot about in our training programs. So there's a few thoughts that I had. I don't want to overload people with too many ideas today, but these are some of the common paradoxes that we see in franchising. There are many others. Another one is around control, which we touched on earlier, that we want to maintain control over decision making, but we also want to take on board the views of franchisees. That we might leave that for another discussion. So, Katrina, I'm going to hand back to you and take any questions.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to just hold up a copy of the franchisee factor and let everybody know we do keep a small stock of these in our offices in Boulder, Colorado. So if you're interested in any books from Greg, please just reach out and let me know. And Evan, thank you, Evan. He kindly said the franchisee factor is a must read for anyone in franchising. So thanks for that, Evan. Evan, do you want to elaborate on that at all?
Well, one, it's a great book for your entire team and staff, because they're instantly going to look at every franchisee and say, oh, this person's in this stage, and maybe they're in this stage in one part of the relationship and another stage in a different part. But it's also great for your franchisees, because then they start to see, and I think franchisees move faster to the we factor at the end when they see themselves and go, oh, and they get it, because the book does such a good job of talking about the progression and the power of being at the end. So I think it's a great book. I recommend it to everybody whenever someone says to me they want to get into franchising or they have issues. This is it really is a great read.
Thank you, Evan.
And I like his other stuff too. Just want to put down anything else you write. And you should definitely be on Greg's email list, because every month he sends out really interesting information.
Yeah, just an invitation that if you want to sign up to the tips, you can go to our website at franchiserelationships.com and we'll send you that. They're free. Patrick has got a note here in the feed. Franchisees want shared success. The problem is when the franchisor is successful while the network is not. That's exactly right, Patrick. If there's not mutual success and profitability, it's not sustainable. Absolutely agree. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts?
Hey, Greg.
Yeah.
This is Prit. I just wanted to share just one thing of the comment you made, because I faced it. It was tremendously challenging, because I used to be director of operations for a franchise that had mature franchisees and emerging franchisees. Your point about not always franchisees making money or happy, that was a huge struggle for us, because we had large franchisees, high volume franchisees making a lot of money, and they were the toughest to manage.
That's right. They raise the bar and they keep you honest often. I think, Prit, you raise an interesting point about skepticism and challenging. I find that the best franchisees are healthy skeptics. And a skeptic is someone who challenges you to find the truth about things. But once you put forward the facts and a good argument, they'll go, that's fine, I get it, thank you. And then they'll go on and implement that. A cynic, on the other hand, is very difficult to deal with. And a cynic is someone who's lost faith in you and the business model. And no matter what you say to someone like that, they'll say, yes, but, because their mission is to pull you down because somehow they've been disappointed. And this is where the management of expectations is so important. Yeah.
Great.
Greg, if I could ask a question. When COVID is over, what is the biggest opportunity to improve franchise relationships based on the world changing in terms of technology use and the franchisor experience going through COVID? What do you see the biggest changes in the franchisor-franchisee relationship as a result of this experience?
Yeah, thanks, Evan. That's a really solid question. I'd say there's two things that are important. One is there's a certain humility that we need to have as leaders, that we don't have all the answers, and we retain this sense of curiosity and openness to what's going on around us rather than a closed-mindedness. Some people refer to this as a growth mindset, and we define a growth mindset is that we're striving to improve rather than prove. So I think that's a really good definition, because once you want to prove yourself, you've locked yourself into a position, and now we've got the A or the B alternative, and the environment may be calling for C or D options. So when we strive to improve, we open ourselves up for feedback, and we don't take it personally. So that would be the first thing. And I think if you can encourage a culture with a growth mindset, and this starts at the top from the CEO, and the best CEOs, when they're asked a question, and if they don't know the answer, they'll say, "That's a great question. I'm not sure of the answer to that question, but you've got me thinking. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a conversation with this person, and we're going to explore this further. And I would invite you, if you'd like to be involved with me, and let's work together to get a solution to this," rather than saying, "Oh, well, that's a stupid question. We don't need to look at that." So that openness would be a key thing, that humility. And I think the willingness to consult. I mentioned earlier about the paradox of control, that you need to have a certain amount of consultation, but consultation doesn't mean that you give the final decision to everybody. That's that sort of model where everybody has a say and we don't make the final decision till everybody's happy. That's unsustainable. You'll go broke. But you do need to consult with everyone, listen to their points of view, and then you make the final decision based on what you believe is right for the long term of the business. But you need to go back to people and explain why. So there's a few thoughts. And obviously, we need to move quickly in these times and not to get bogged down in bureaucracy. People need to make decisions and try things out, but always have a method of testing. Did it work or didn't it work? And if it's not working, adjust it. So there would be a few thoughts.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I've got a question for Evan, because he may have another. Did you have something else in mind, Evan, just in relation to that?
I think your 2 points are things that are, I think there have been much more humility and much more openness and much more frankness because of COVID than there was before. And if people continue that, and if people, I think people were listening more, and, what, to your point, I think if you continue that, I would add that the use of technology and the comfort of Zoom is a game changer in franchise relationships, because instead of doing a phone call, you can do a Zoom meeting and you can see each other and you can share files and share, do a lot of things on screen. And where there was a lot of apprehension for using electronics, there, is certainly less now. And it's not just Zoom, but every form of electronics, any intranet that you're doing, communication. I think things like forums and discussions that were not being used before COVID started to get used, when COVID took place, and to keep that momentum and to embrace these changes. Because I do think there is a fundamental improvement in franchisor-franchisee relationships out of COVID, not in all cases, but,
we have actually seen, and I know Eric and the team at the Franchise Business Review also have seen a lift in franchisee satisfaction during COVID. I think COVID's provided the franchising sector with an opportunity to really shine and to show that we can pull together and communicate. So thanks, Evan, for your comments. Really great. We've been running a virtual business for 12 years. So we've run I've got my team scattered all over the place, all over the country, and we've proven that it works fine. I think COVID's forced us to use this technology more. Katrina, I'm just aware we're approaching time, so we probably need to wrap it up, hey?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Before we do, I want to just do a quick rundown. And in fact, a couple of our guests have asked. Thank you for that question, Claire, and I will follow up with you. We do have several opportunities to do this kind of interactive work with the FRI team and with Greg Nathan. The first one is coming up right away. It's in 2 weeks. It's August 31st and September 1st, and it's the Culture of Franchising Workshop. This is, Greg, I might like you to say a little bit about this. This is such a great event from my perspective for franchisor support staff. So if you've got a lot of new people, I was on the phone with a client yesterday and I said, what percentage of your staff is new to franchising? And he just rolled his eyes and he said 90%. And I said, you need to get them in this workshop so that they understand the mindset. What would you like to add, Greg?
Yeah, well, that's why we've developed it, because the complaint we often hear from the CEOs as well as the franchisees is the people at support office don't get it. They treat me like I'm an employee. And that mindset is so important to understand the psychology of the franchisee. So the culture of franchising, it's really efficient. It's two-hour sessions with your support office team. And we teach them about the psychology. How does a franchisee think? And why do they think that way? And therefore, how can you efficiently deliver really good service to your franchisees so they're happier? It's going to make your life less stressful as well. So that's what that's all about.
Yeah. Thank you, Greg. And then the next opportunity we have, Greg mentioned earlier, is the Franchisor Excellence Masterclass. And that is 5 2-hour sessions starting on September 13th. And I can send all of this out to each of you. And a lot of you, I've already sent it this morning so that you have all the particulars. But that's a really great workshop. Greg,
that's for the C-level. So your heads of departments, anyone who's managing a team in your support office. And we talk more about the leadership of franchising. And we talk a lot about change, how to get engagement with the brand, how to provide, strategically really good support to franchisees at their different stages of growth. So that's what that's about. And the third one is the boot camp for the field consultants.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's all I've got. Does anyone have any last questions they want to pop in chat?
I would just state that I've been to Greg's events. They're fantastic. And also, I love the fact that you're doing them 2 hours at a time, because when you go to the live days, you just get overwhelmed. And I think 2 hours are fantastic. And my experience with Zoom meetings is they can be as effective, as long as the person there is actually, paying attention, if you're not doing your email.
Thanks, Evan. We've experienced this today, that the time just flies when there's interaction. We use polls, we use breakout groups, and we've found that the virtual sessions are more effective. Like, we get better results. People say they got more out of the programs than getting people into a room for 2 days, doing these in 2-hour blocks, and we have a little break in between after 50 minutes. So thank you, everybody. I'd be interested to know, just as you're going, if there's one idea that you got from today. I'd love to hear it in the feed. Just something that you found personally useful from the session today. And that's a good way of consolidating the learning as well for everybody. So any thoughts as you leave on what did you get? What's one idea that you got from today? Thanks, Evan. Stacey, power of community, not family. Evan said the power of humility. Thanks, Richard. Yeah, the idea of community, not family. Thank you. Saying the concept of paradox. It is intriguing, but I think to be more successful in life, the more you can look at alternative views of the same situation, it literally grows your brain and teaches you to think more about relationships. All right, well, thank you. Have a lovely rest of week, everybody.
Thank you so much, Greg, once again for getting up at the crack of dawn and serving the North American franchise community and New Zealand and Australia. We've got a global community this go around. But thank you, and thank you everyone for attending.
Bye-bye.